The Zalrics had thought they were the rulers of the galaxy. But as humanity's final blow landed, the empire they had built over millennia was reduced to dust. The Zalric Empire was crumbling, and Cassandra Blake could feel the weight of the galaxy shifting beneath her. The final confrontation had arrived. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about victory, the kind that would echo across the stars for centuries to come. Cassandra stood at the command deck, her fingers steady on the console, as the Zalric capital planet loomed ahead. They had taken out the fleet. They had shattered the Zalric war machine. But Dernak, the Zalric emperor, was still alive. And his empire still controlled one thing, the heart of the galaxy. "Prepare to breach their atmosphere," Cassandra ordered, her voice unwavering. "We end this today." Marcus Hayes was at her side, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an edge of anticipation. "This is it, huh? After everything, we finally get to bring it to them." "This is for humanity," she replied, her eyes locked on the planet below. "And for every species they've crushed in their wake." The human fleet descended, piercing the atmosphere of the Zalric capital with terrifying speed. Every ship was a calculated risk. The Zalrics weren't going to let them land without a fight. But it wasn't just about taking the planet. It was about making a statement. The Zalrics had thought they were unbeatable. They had thought that no one could challenge them. They were wrong. The first wave of Zalric defenses fired on the approaching ships. Explosions rocked the human vessels, but their shields held. The humans had anticipated this. They had come prepared. "Brace for impact." Jayin called from a tactical station. Her voice was calm, but the tension was palpable. "We're entering their capital's defense grid. Don't get cocky." The ship shook as they were hit by another volley of laser fire, but Cassandra remained focused. She was used to the chaos now. What had once been a battle for survival was now a battle for dominance. The Zalrics had underestimated them at every turn, and now they were paying the price. "We've got a clear shot," Marcus said, looking up from his display. "Targeting their central command tower now." Cassandra nodded. "Do it." In an instant, the human fleet's weapons fired in perfect unison, striking the Zalric capital's core defenses. The ground below cracked open as energy blasts tore through the planet's surface. But the real strike was still to come. "Deploy the final assault team," Cassandra ordered. As her command rang out, a team of specially trained soldiers, led by Hayes, prepared to descend to the planet's surface. The final showdown would take place in the heart of the Zalric Empire, Dernak's stronghold. It was a suicide mission, but they had no choice. This was the only way to end it. Minutes later, the team descended, dropping through the atmosphere in combat pods, their landing sites already pre-programmed. They hit the ground running, their boots slamming into the scorched earth of the Zalric capital. They didn't have time to waste. The Zalrics were already regrouping, their elite forces assembling in a last-ditch effort to protect Dernak. But the humans weren't afraid. They had faced worse. "Let's finish this," Hayes said, his voice cold as he led the charge toward the palace. Cassandra watched from her command deck, eyes locked on the screens. Every move the humans made was calculated. Every strike was deadly. The palace was within their reach. Then the communications crackled. "Emperor Dernak is dead." The voice came through the comms, flat and devoid of emotion. "The capital has fallen." The message was clear. The final battle had been won. The Zalric Empire, the mighty power that had once ruled over the galaxy, was no more. The galaxy was free. Cassandra allowed herself a single, fleeting moment of relief. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about conquering. It was about giving the galaxy a chance to rebuild. "Status report?" she asked. "We've secured the palace," Hayes replied. "The Emperor's dead, and their command structure has crumbled. The rest of the Zalric forces are surrendering. It's over." But as Cassandra stood there, staring at the wreckage of the Empire, she knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Humanity had earned its place at the table, and they wouldn't stop until they ensured the galaxy would never again fall under the boot of an empire like the Zalrics. The reckoning had come, and humanity had claimed victory. The Zarics had made their final mistake. They thought humanity was a passing threat. Now, they were about to discover the true cost of underestimating them. The galaxy's greatest empire, reigning for eons, was on the brink of collapse. And the humans had made it clear that they weren't going to stop until the Zarics learned what it meant to fight a war on humanity's terms. Cassandra Blake stood at the edge of the command deck, her eyes fixed on the massive warship looming in front of her. The Zarics had underestimated them at every turn, but the humans were playing a different game now. This was no longer about surviving trials in an arena. This was about rewriting the rules of the galaxy. "Prepare for engagement," Cassandra ordered, her voice as cold and sharp as the edge of a blade. "We've been given a window. We take it now, or we lose everything." Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, his face hard and determined, nodded. "What's the plan?" "We break their fleet," Cassandra said, turning to face him. "Now, while they're still reeling from the shock of what happened with the war behemoth, they think we're just survivors. It's time to show them what we really are." The humans had already proven their resilience, had already proven they could defeat the Zarics in one-on-one combat. But now it was time to hit them where it hurt. The Zaric fleet was their power base, their heart. And if the humans could crush it, they would break the entire empire. But Cassandra knew the risk. The Zaric fleet had more firepower than the humans could ever hope to match. But that was the key. They didn't need to match it. They just needed to outthink it. "Deploy the decoys," she said to Jae-yun, who was already working on the battle plan. "We're going to make them chase ghosts." Jae-yun smiled, her fingers dancing over the console. "It's ready." In the distance, the Zaric fleet appeared, a fleet of hundreds of ships, each bristling with weapons. But the humans had a secret weapon, a fleet of decoy ships, programmed to mimic the humans' real ships down to the last detail. It wasn't just a trick. It was the beginning of a larger, more dangerous strategy. Cassandra felt the ship lurch as the decoy fleet sprang into action. The Zarics immediately responded, sending wave after wave of drones and weapons in pursuit. The humans, meanwhile, kept moving, always one step ahead, always a blur in the vastness of space. "Now, Marcus," Cassandra shouted, "target their weak points." Marcus, seated at the gunner's console, launched the first wave of missiles, aiming for the vulnerable midsections of the Zaric ships. The blast shook the hull of the nearest warship, sending sparks flying from its exposed core. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it sent a message. The Zarics were no longer the predators. They were the prey. The decoys kept moving, drawing the Zaric ships further away from their core fleet. But it wasn't enough to rely on tricks alone. The humans needed to strike, and strike fast. "We've bought enough time," Cassandra said. "All units engage." The real human fleet burst from its hiding place, invisible up until this moment, unleashing hell upon the unsuspecting Zaric ships. They had been so focused on the decoys that they didn't notice the real threat until it was too late. The battle was chaos. Explosions tore through the void as human ships tore apart the Zaric vessels, hitting their engines, their weapon systems, anything they could target. The Zarics fought back with everything they had, but for the first time in a millennium, they were losing control. Cassandra could feel the momentum shifting, feel the power of the Zaric Empire crumbling beneath her feet. They had been expecting an easy conquest, but what they had found instead was a force more relentless than they could ever have imagined. The Zaric Emperor's voice crackled through the comms. "This ends now. You are no longer welcome in my domain." "Too late," Cassandra replied, her voice steady. "The moment you underestimated humanity was the moment you lost." The Zarics had always believed they could break their enemies with sheer force. But they hadn't understood the strength of humanity's will, the way that, no matter the odds, they always found a way to survive, to fight back, and to win. The last Zaric flagship fell from the sky, its engine core engulfed in flames, its dark hull crumbling under the weight of human resolve. As the silence settled in, Cassandra stood at the helm of her ship, watching the remnants of the Zaric fleet float in space like shattered pieces of a broken empire. "They'll come for us again," Marcus said, his voice filled with grim certainty. Cassandra didn't look away from the battlefield. Let them. This time we'll be ready. The tipping point had arrived. The Zalrics had learned what it meant to face humanity. Now, they would have to learn the hard way. There was no going back. The Zalrics had spent millennia at the top of the food chain. But in the span of one battle, their world was about to shatter. The battlefield was chaos. The arena, once a place for the Zalrics to assert their dominance, had transformed into a theater of human ingenuity and precision. Cassandra Blake, her heart pounding, watched as the last of the Zalric drones fell to the ground, twitching and lifeless. For the first time in centuries, the Zalrics were on the back foot. Marcus Hayes wiped the blood from his visor and adjusted his pulse rifle. "They're coming, Cass," he said, his voice low but steady. "They're going to throw everything they have at us now." Cassandra didn't need to hear it. She could feel it in the air. The Zalrics were no longer playing games. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was a war. The Zalric Emperor Durnak had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. His fleet had been scattered, his drones neutralized, and his precious arena traps were nothing more than obstacles for humans who had learned how to use their environment to their advantage. But the Zalrics had one card left to play, a card they hadn't revealed until now. Without warning, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A massive roar filled the air as something enormous shot up from the depths of the arena floor. It was a creature, a beast unlike anything they had faced before. The Zalric War Behemoth. It was a creature of nightmares, a hybrid of organic terror and technological menace. Its body was covered in thick black armor, with spiked protrusions running down its back like jagged mountains. Its glowing red eyes locked onto the humans, and it bellowed, sending a shockwave through the air. Marcus didn't hesitate. He was already moving, his rifle aimed at the creature's massive head. "We need to hit it hard and fast. Aim for the joints." Cassandra nodded, her mind racing. They had faced beasts, drones, and traps, but this was something else. It was a living weapon, a creature bred for destruction, and the Zalrics were putting it all on the line. The War Behemoth charged with terrifying speed. Its massive limbs tore through the ground with each step, shaking the entire arena. The humans scattered, using their agility to stay one step ahead of the beast's monstrous strikes. But this time, it wasn't just about survival. This was a fight for dominance. EMP pulse now. Cassandra barked. Yin didn't need to be told twice. She pressed a button on her wrist console, sending out a powerful EMP blast that sent a ripple through the arena. The creature staggered, its movements slowing for just a fraction of a second. That was all Marcus needed. With a shout, he unloaded a barrage of plasma rounds directly at the beast's exposed joints. The rounds tore through its armor, but the creature was far from finished. It howled in rage, swinging its massive tail like a battering ram. The blow sent Marcus flying through the air, crashing against the wall with a sickening thud. "Marcus!" Cassandra screamed, watching as he crumpled to the ground, his armor cracked and smoking. Yun rushed to his side, pulling him behind cover. "He's alive, but we've got to finish this." Cassandra's eyes narrowed. The War Behemoth was slowly recovering, its glowing eyes fixed on them with a malevolent intelligence. This was no mere animal. This was a weapon, and its creators were watching, waiting for the humans to fail. But they wouldn't fail. Not today. Everyone focus. Cassandra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We end this now." The humans spread out, drawing the beast's attention. With synchronized precision, they moved as one. While Marcus recovered, Yun and Cassandra flanked the creature, their movements fluid, a deadly dance of coordination. They had learned from the Zalric's mistakes. Where the Zalrics relied on overwhelming strength, the humans relied on speed, precision, and teamwork. And now, it was their turn to hunt. Cassandra leaped onto a nearby platform, aiming her rifle at the creature's exposed underbelly. She fired a concentrated burst, hitting the weak spot just below its ribs. The creature roared in pain, its massive form buckling under the strike. It wasn't enough. "Now, Marcus!" Cassandra shouted. He was back on his feet, rifle in hand. With one final, explosive shot, Marcus fired directly at the beast's head. The shot struck true, punching through its skull with a resounding crack. The war behemoth let out one last, guttural scream before collapsing to the ground, dead. For a moment, silence fell over the arena. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the humans as they stood over the fallen creature, their bodies aching, but their spirits unbroken. The Zalrics had thought they were the hunters. They had believed their empire was invincible. But the humans had flipped the script. They weren't just surviving. They were hunting the hunters. And now, the Zalrics would have to face the consequences. "We've won this round," Marcus said, his voice hoarse but triumphant. But the game's far from over. Cassandra didn't need to say anything. She knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Zalrics had underestimated humanity before, but now they had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humans were not prey. They were predators. And this galaxy? It was about to learn that the true apex predator had arrived. The Zalrics had always believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy. But the humans weren't just surviving their trials. They were learning, adapting, and turning the tables. The dust hadn't yet settled from the last arena clash when Cassandra Blake realized something critical. The Zalrics weren't just testing human strength. They were studying them. What had started as a brutal trial had quickly evolved into something else, a game of survival where the rules were constantly changing. Every obstacle, every trial, every death, those were just data points to the Zalrics. They weren't just watching the humans, they were trying to understand them, dissect their reactions, predict their next moves. The problem was, humans weren't predictable. At least, not in the way the Zalrics assumed. Cassandra leaned against the stone wall of the small chamber they'd been assigned after the last trial, her thoughts racing. The Zalrics' arrogance had been their first mistake. They assumed humanity was weak, disorganized, and primitive. But as each test passed, their assumption crumbled. The humans had something the Zalrics didn't expect: adaptability. Her mind flashed back to the arena. How Marcus had outmaneuvered the beast. How their strategy, improvisation, and sheer will had saved them. Every moment in the arena had been a lesson. And now they were ready to use those lessons. Lieutenant Hayes entered the room, his expression grim but resolute. His hands, still stained with blood from the fight, clenched at his sides. "We've made it through the trials. But they're starting to expect more from us. They think they can break us." Cassandra nodded. "They can't break us. They're not used to what we can do." "You think we can win this?" Hayes asked, his voice laced with doubt but tinged with hope. "I don't think we have a choice," Cassandra replied. She turned to the data screen in front of her, which displayed the latest analysis of the Zalrics' tactics. Jae-Yun had been studying their combat patterns, their responses to human ingenuity, and their strategic decisions. The results were chilling and enlightening. "We've been reacting to their games. Now it's time we start making our own moves," Jae-Yun said, entering the room with a tablet in hand. Her eyes were wide with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "The Zalrics might have superior firepower, but we've been missing the bigger picture. They rely on brute force, and they underestimate our ability to adapt. If we play this right, we can use their tactics against them." Cassandra glanced at the screen. It showed a network of Zalric-controlled systems, each linked by dark lines representing their military infrastructure. They have one major weakness. They believe they're the apex predators because of their strength, but they've never had to outthink an opponent. They can't anticipate human unpredictability. Hayes let out a bitter laugh. "You're saying we're playing their game, but we make the rules." "Exactly," Cassandra said. "The Zalrics know how to crush, but they don't know how to survive." It was a bold theory, and it had to work. The next trial would be the real test. The Zalrics had thrown everything they had at them so far, but the humans had proven resilient, adaptable, and cunning. Now, the tables had turned. The Zalrics had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was about to cost them. The doors to the chamber slammed open. Two Zalric guards, towering and fierce, entered without a word, their eyes fixed on the humans as they ordered them to follow. There was no ceremony. No more games. The real trial was about to begin. As Cassandra Hayes and Jaehyun walked down the cold, metallic hallways, Cassandra's mind sharpened. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about showing the Zalrics that they'd made the wrong assumption. Humanity wasn't weak. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win. They entered the arena once again, but this time, the stakes were higher. The Zalrics had outfitted the space with traps and automated defenses, designed to overwhelm and destroy anything that entered. An entire fleet of enemy drones hovered above, their weapons trained on the humans below. Welcome to the final challenge. The Zalric announcer's voice boomed across the loudspeakers. Prove your worth or die. The countdown began. Cassandra's heart raced, but she held herself steady. She could feel the weight of their eyes upon them, the entire galaxy waiting for their end. The Zalrics had placed their faith in their tech, their weaponry. But what they didn't understand was that humans weren't afraid to think. They were prepared to fight with every inch of their being. Marcus, Jay, get ready, Cassandra said through their comms, her voice steady. The countdown hit 0. The arena exploded in a hail of gunfire and energy blasts. Drones dove from the sky, their weapons locking onto the humans in an instant. But it wasn't the overwhelming firepower that concerned Cassandra. It was the strategy. The Zalrics had stacked the odds against them, and they had no idea that the humans were about to flip the entire script. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate us, she muttered. Without hesitation, Marcus opened fire, his rifle cutting through the air with precision. Jaehyun activated a series of EMP pulses, disabling the drones in mid-flight, sending them plummeting to the ground like malfunctioning toys. The arena's traps triggered, but the humans had anticipated them, maneuvering through with calculated speed, using the very environment the Zalrics had crafted to trap them. The Zalrics didn't see it coming. As Cassandra and her team fought, they weren't just surviving, they were rewriting the rules. The Zalrics had made a fatal mistake. They had believed that strength alone was enough to dominate. But humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their tactics. It was in their ability to learn, to adapt, and to win against all odds. And the Zalrics were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The Zalrics never imagined humans could survive their first strike. But now they had no choice but to face the inevitable. Humans were no ordinary prey. The atmosphere of the Zalric arena was suffocating. The air buzzed with the excitement of the crowd, a mix of roars and jeers from countless alien spectators packed into the stands. Cassandra Blake, though unshaken on the surface, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. The arena floor, a wide sand-colored expanse surrounded by brutal-looking weapons and traps, felt less like a place for a diplomatic meeting and more like the final resting place of those who dared to challenge the Zalric Empire. It was supposed to be a game, a test. Or so the Zalrics had thought. Ambassador Blake had underestimated the depth of their arrogance. They saw the humans as an afterthought, a small inconvenience to be crushed for sport. The terms of the negotiation had shifted in an instant. Instead of a diplomatic discussion, it had become a battle for survival. The Zalrics had declared this a trial by combat, a test of human strength and will, forcing Cassandra to send her best soldiers into a deadly game of survival. She stood at the edge of the arena, flanked by her team. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, his massive form standing like a statue, exuded calm confidence. His eyes narrowed as they scanned the field ahead. Behind him stood Dr. Jaehyun, clutching a data tablet, calculating the odds with cold precision. But none of them truly knew what they were up against. The Zalric Emperor Durnak watched from his throne, his massive form draped in ornate battle armor. His bloodshot eyes gleamed with malice. "Human," he sneered, addressing Blake from across the distance. "We shall see if your kind is as weak as your reputation suggests. Enter the arena and prove that you are more than mere insects." Cassandra didn't flinch. She had expected this. What she hadn't expected was just how deadly the game would be. The Zalrics weren't interested in combat for sport. They were testing her people's resolve. And she knew the stakes. Failure meant death. As the gates of the arena clanged shut behind her, The ground shook beneath their feet. A low growl reverberated through the air as a creature from the deepest pits of a Zalric planet emerged from the shadows. Its hulking form, covered in black scales, towered over the arena. Its eyes glowed with hunger. This was no simple trial. This was a message. First test. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. Survive the beast. The creature charged. The humans, prepared for combat, scattered instinctively. Marcus Hayes moved with a fluidity that belied his size, taking cover behind column. His hand gripped the pulse rifle, ready for anything. The creature's claws tore through the air as it swiped at the nearest target, one of the smaller combatants, a member of the human team who didn't stand a chance. Blood sprayed, and the lifeless body was flung across the arena. Cassandra's stomach turned, but she pushed it aside. The Zalrics didn't care about casualties. To them, it was all part of the spectacle. "Marcus," she shouted, her voice tight but clear. Hayes didn't hesitate. He moved fast, circling around the beast, taking a moment to line up his shot. The creature snarled, twisting to face him. Its massive head lowered, preparing to charge. Blake's heart raced as she watched him. The pressure was mounting. They could lose here, now. All of humanity's hopes rested on this fight. The pulse rifle fired with a resounding crack, the shot echoing across the arena. It struck the creature's shoulder, sending a jolt of energy through its body. But it didn't stop the beast. It roared and lunged. Marcus dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's razor-sharp claws. He rolled to his feet in one fluid motion, tossing a grenade toward the creature's legs. The explosion shook the ground, but the beast barely faltered. Its enormous form continued its relentless pursuit. Then, in an instant, something shifted. Marcus, breathing hard, adjusted his tactics. He wasn't going to kill the creature. He was going to outsmart it. He sprinted, weaving between pillars and traps, drawing the creature's attention. When it lunged at him again, Marcus was ready. With one swift motion, he activated the arena's hidden mechanisms. The ground beneath the creature's feet gave way, a trap that sent the beast tumbling into a deep pit below the arena. The crowd went silent. The Zalrics, who had expected a human to perish in minutes, now stared in stunned silence. Dernak's expression darkened, but he said nothing. The game wasn't over yet. This was just the first test. Cassandra's mind raced. Marcus had won this round, but it wouldn't be enough to convince the Zalrics that humans were more than mere insects. The real test lay ahead, and the stakes had just risen to an unimaginable height. But one thing was certain now. This was no longer just about survival. This was about proving to the Zalrics and the entire galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. And they were just getting started. The galaxy's most feared predators, the Zalrics, had never been challenged until they met humans. Their empire stretched across the stars like a tidal wave of destruction, leaving nothing but ash and ruin in their wake. No species had dared to face them for centuries. Those who tried were erased in moments, their planets reduced to smoking graves. The Zalrics didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them, stripping away life and culture with brutal efficiency. And now, they were going to wipe out the one species that dared to oppose them: humanity. It was a simple mission. Ambassador Cassandra Blake stood at the helm of the Terran Federation envoy ship, watching the Zalric homeworld come into view through the ship's main viewport. Their sleek, dark ships loomed ominously in the distance, encircling the planet like sharks circling prey. The Federation had tried diplomacy, offering peace and trade, but the Zalrics had shown no interest in such things. They saw humanity as nothing more than a brief nuisance in their vast empire, easy to crush, like so many before. Cassandra's heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had prepared for this moment her entire career. Standing at the head of the first human diplomatic mission to the Zalric Empire, she had only one goal: to survive, to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't extinguished in a single stroke. She glanced at her officers, Lieutenant Marcus Iron Fist Hayes, a towering figure in tactical combat armor, his expression unreadable, and Dr. Jae-Yun, the Federation's top strategist and expert in alien cultures. Their eyes met, filled with the same resolve. They knew the truth. This wouldn't be an ordinary diplomatic meeting. They were walking into a lion's den. If they weren't careful, they wouldn't make it out alive. "Prepare for entry," Blake said, her voice steady but tight. "This is it. No going back." As the ship plunged into the Zalric atmosphere, the calm before the storm settled over them. They were about to meet the very species who had never known fear, never known defeat. A species whose warriors had once torn entire civilizations apart in mere hours. A species that had never considered humans worth a second glance. The comms channel crackled to life. The Zalric Emperor's voice echoed in their ship's cockpit, cold and calculating. "Human diplomats, you are in our space. Do not mistake this for mercy. You will deliver your message and leave, or face the consequences." Cassandra didn't flinch. "We come in peace, Emperor Durnak," she said, the words almost foreign on her tongue. Peace was a concept the Zalrics had long abandoned. "We wish to discuss mutual benefits, trade, technology, a future beyond conflict." A dark laugh rumbled through the comm. "You speak of peace when you stand at the edge of our territory? Your race is insignificant, a tiny speck among the stars." Blake's hand tightened around the console. She had anticipated their hostility, but the weight of his words hit harder than expected. They weren't just facing an enemy. They were facing an empire that had lived for millennia on the belief that they were the apex of existence. But they hadn't met humanity yet. "We're not here to fight," Blake replied, her voice unwavering. "We're here to ensure our survival, to show you that there's more to us than what you think." There was a brief silence on the other end, then a sharp command. "Bring them down." The ship shuddered as it was pulled into the planet's gravitational field, its engines protesting against the sudden force. Within moments, they were descending toward the surface, a war-torn world, devoid of natural beauty, the remnants of countless battles fought and won, all under the Zalric's brutal hand. Suddenly, a warning light flashed on the console. "Incoming missiles," shouted Hayes. Cassandra's blood ran cold. Before she could react, the sky erupted in a storm of energy. The ship lurched violently, and the world outside became a blur of light and fire. The Zalrics weren't interested in peace. The ship's hull groaned under the assault. Cassandra gritted her teeth and braced for impact. The room went dark as the ship's systems failed. She could hear nothing but the pounding of her own heart. And then, just as quickly, the ship stabilized, drifting toward the surface in a controlled fall. "Hold on," she shouted, her voice strained but firm. They had been attacked. The Zalrics didn't want to negotiate. They wanted to make a statement, one that said humans didn't belong here. And yet, despite the fear and chaos, one thought burned in Cassandra's mind. They were alive. For now.